Hi, I'm Brian.
Hey everybody, here we are looking at SketchUp. I'm going to try and walk you through my shed build in SketchUp. I've drawn it to help me visualize kind of the things that are going to happen and to make an order for lumber, which as I make this video is actually arriving today. So if you've watched some previous videos, I've actually already got the floor done, but I haven't started on the walls or the roof or anything like that. So I've got all the lumber coming, and this is a drawing to try and show kind of how those steps are going to flow, how things are going to fit together, and how everything's going to look. I'll make a couple quick caveats here before I get started. I am not an expert neither in SketchUp nor construction, so if I do a couple of things wrong here or something doesn't look quite right, feel free to let me know. But I'm not a pro at this. But this was really to visualize so that I could make an order and so that I could kind of have an idea of how this stuff's going to go together before I got the actual materials in my hand. And I've cut a few corners in the drawing here just to kind of simplify it, but I think it should give you a general idea. So I appreciate any comments that anybody's got on some of the building techniques, but I'm pretty sure there are several different ways to kind of skin this cat, so I've had to make a few decisions here and there, sometimes based on aesthetics, sometimes based on cost, sometimes based on other things. So please keep in mind that there might be several different ways to do some of the things I'm going to show here. So as long as it's not going to fall over the way I've done it, I'll probably be happy with that. But if you see anything horribly wrong, feel free to let me know. So let's dive in. Like I said, the floor is already done. So what I'll show here is, I've got a skid foundation here, and on top of that is a joist system and a plywood subfloor. So basically this is where I'm starting from. So the first step to be done here really is the wall framing, which there's a lot there, but I think it's pretty standard stuff, pretty straightforward. This is all 2x4 construction. You got sill plates, double top plates, or a top and a cap plate. They overlap on seams so that things are joints, so that it's stronger. Pretty standard openings for doors and windows here. Standard header construction for doors and windows. A piece of 2x6 on either side with a piece of 1/2-inch plywood sandwiched in between. Above and below, when necessary, above. You've got cripple studs above and below windows. On the short wall over here, I actually put the header right up against the top plate. Here's my door opening, kind of same header. I've shown these. These are the rough openings for the doors and windows I've purchased. But other than that, I think it's pretty standard framing. I have chosen, this will be it's a 12x24 shed on the floor. This will be a single sloped roof. So what you can see here from the side is I've got one high wall, and then that'd be the front wall, and the back wall is low, and there'll be rafters, kind of just a single slope across. To do that, again, I think there's multiple ways to do this, but I went with 3 short walls that meet up with that one tall wall, instead of trying to make these side walls kind of step up. That introduces several angles and things that I didn't want to deal with. So I went with 3 short walls that meet up with the tall wall. There's a little bit of detail in the corners that that SketchUp helps people like me visualize that I hadn't thought about. When 2 walls meet, when you frame out 2 walls, when they meet, how do you really connect them, and how do you have a nailing surface on the inside? So there's actually, I think you can kind of see it here, there's an extra stud thrown in on this wall kind of sideways so that this end wall has something to meet up with and nail to, and it provides a nailer on the inside of the room. So there's just a couple little details like that, but again, I think that's pretty standard stuff. If you know anything about framing and if you've read any of that stuff, there are other ways to do some of this stuff again, but I think pretty standard the way I've done it. So that should cover. This would all be put together. You've got king studs, jack studs, Jack studs come under the headers. Cripple studs, like I said, above and below door and window openings. All pretty standard terminology, I think. This will be all put together with nails from a nail gun, hopefully to speed that up. I've got a nail gun for this job, but I've never actually used one before, but that should hopefully speed a lot of this up. But that's it. This is a 36-inch wide door. These windows are 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall. Everything framed pretty standard, I think. So after that, I will put on some wall sheathing. And again, these walls will actually be built kind of laying on the floor and then stood up. That's a pretty standard way to do that. And even the sheathing, which I'll show now, which is 1/2 inch OSB, will be put on before they're stood up on the ground. They'll be put on and then stood up. Again, I haven't shown all the cuts necessarily down the sides here, but this is how the sheathing will go on, and then after the fact you can actually cut out the openings for the doors and the windows. But that's how the sheathing will go on before you stand it up. So I'll take that away, but imagine that's there. After things are stood up and the sheathing is on there, I'll be putting house wrap, either a Tyvek or some other brand of house wrap around the whole structure. And next would be the roof framing. So essentially the roof framing is a lot like the floor, with a few differences. Again, I said single slope roof. The floor is 12 feet in this dimension. The roof is going to be 16 feet. So to give about 2 feet of overhang on either side, it'll be slightly less because it's tilted like this, but 2 feet of overhang in the front and the back. That's actually why you can see this blocking that goes along the wall here. It's to close up that gap that'll be created by the rafters above the wall and before the roof sheathing. So there's blocking down there. There's some blocking added to the ends to kind of support this special rafter. I think one name for this rafter is a fly rafter or flying rafter. As you can see, all these rafters are supported by the front and back wall. They sit on the front and back wall, and they'll be notched appropriately to sit on those top plates. But the end rafters are special. They just kind of hang out in space. So they're supported by the fascia board that runs kind of around the whole perimeter. They're squeezed in there, and this extra blocking here to support them hanging out in space there. But that gives me a total of a 16-foot roof from front to back and 27 feet from side to side. Again, the floor is 24. I'm going about 1.5 feet of overhang on the sides to give a total of 27. That was sized on purpose to fit the metal roofing panels that I'm going to add on the roof. But again, this is 2x8 framing here for the roof, and it's at 24-inch on center, which should be enough support for this roof. Pretty standard, a lot like the floor. There will be hurricane ties where these rafters meet the walls. So those will all have hurricane ties. That's the fastening mechanism. So it should provide a lot of stability there, because we do get some pretty serious winds here. On top of that framing will be sheathing on the roof. This is actually going to be 1/2 inch plywood. It's, again, very similar to the floor build, just tilted. One difference between this and the floor is there won't be blocking for all the seams. On the floor, I put some blocking so that every seam of every piece of plywood would be supported. On the roof, instead, it's done a little differently. I use something called either sheathing clips or H-clips between these panels. In one direction, the direction that the rafters run, all these seams will fall on a rafter and they'll be supported. But this other direction, this way, each of these seams is kind of unsupported between the rafters, so there's 24 inches of kind of unsupported space here. So those clips that I'm talking about serve two purposes. One, they provide a little support in that unsupported space, and they also space out these panels so that they can experience the expansion and contraction that they do as with the weather. So there are clips that go between these panels to give that extra stability and expansion and contraction space. So that's one difference between the roof and the floor. But other than that, the roof and the floor are actually pretty similar structures. So that covers, I think, the roofing framing. On top of that will be a tar paper or a synthetic. I'm actually using a synthetic paper on top of this to go underneath the roof, the metal roofing that will go on top. But that, I think, so one little detail, again, because I chose to make 3 low walls meeting up with this one tall wall, I've got some additional, what I'll call cripple studs here. I think that might be the right name for them. They're not really there for support, again, because there's a rafter running on top of these that is supported by the front and back wall. So these aren't necessary for support. They're really more there to nail to. They're nailers for the sheathing and the siding that will go on the outside of the building. So, but that's how I've kind of bridged that gap. If I didn't put those there, there'd be a big empty space here with nothing to nail to. So those are really just there as nailers. I think it's that simple. So they'll have to be cut to the appropriate angle, of course, to meet up with the rafter. But that's what those are there for. I think that's pretty much all the detail that's necessary there. Some statistics. That roof, again, like I said, is 16 by 27. The math says that you can collect about 0.62 gallons of water for every inch of rainfall for every square foot of roof or of surface. So doing that math, this gets me about, with our average rainfall of, I'll ballpark it at 12 inches a year. It's anywhere, I think, from 11 to 13 or 14. But if I ballpark it at 12, that gets us about 3,000 gallons, roughly, give or take, of water off of this roof over the course of a year. So a nice size, 2,500 gallon or so tank on the side of this thing should give us a good chunk of our water needs collected off this roof. So that's another purpose of this shed. It's going to start out largely as a storage shed to keep some of our things dry before the house is built, until the house is built. It'll also serve as a workshop a bit and just other miscellaneous things. And then someday down the road, when the house is built and we pull some things out of it, it'll become maybe more of a serious workshop, and who knows what else it could turn into. But hopefully it'll last a long time, built this way. I think I've chosen pretty standard building techniques that should be pretty durable and pretty strong. So hopefully this will last for a while, but feel free to comment on anything you see that's out of whack there. I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else really to cover here. On top of the sheathing, the wall sheathing that I showed earlier that runs kind of side to side along the studs, and of course cutouts for doors and windows, there will be, I'm using a siding called LP SmartSide. It's an engineered siding that will go, and I'm about to pop it on here, but essentially what you'll see is the sheathing runs kind of side to side here. The siding will run up and down, and again cut out for the doors and the windows. But this is a siding that just basically, it's pre-primed and it just has to be painted basically. So that's what's going to cover around the outer edges. One thing I've got to figure out is what happens with the sheathing and the siding kind of create a corner here. Maybe I just leave some of them a little longer so that one overlaps the other. Otherwise you've got a little kind of gap here that I suppose there's some trim pieces that need to be put on. I haven't really considered trim yet around all the doors and windows and corners, so maybe trim is the answer here. But if anybody's got any suggestions of how to either place this siding and sheathing or what to do after the fact to kind of get myself a waterproof corner here, maybe trim is the answer, but that's something I haven't really resolved yet. But I think that covers kind of the whole setup. Tried to cover it. I tried to give you enough detail, but yet not go on for, I actually taped this once already and came out about a half hour, so I went way too long. So I tried to shorten it up a little bit. Hopefully that gives you the details you need to kind of understand where I'm going with this. And again, I'll make videos to follow along with the actual build real time. But let me know if you see anything crazy here. But other than that, thanks for watching. And stop back and watch it all go together for real. Thanks. We'll see you on the next one.